Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at chapter 11 of the Ecce textbook, and specifically we're going to translate the story. So before you begin, again, like I always say, you want to make sure that you've got the grammar under control, that you've got the vocab under control, and once you feel pretty good about both those things, try reading this out loud. Grab a partner, grab a classmate, read the story so you can practice your pronunciation, and also have a partner read it back to you so you can practice your listening skills. These are really important and things you want to always make sure that you're doing so that you have a lot of ways to really understand and interpret the story. It's not just reading and translating in your head. Before we dive into that, though, we want to make sure that we have the grammar under control and that we have a good sense of what's going on and what's new in this chapter. So if you want to get a real overview of it, feel free to read the notes in your textbook or take a look at my grammar video, one or the other. But the big thing that you're after in this chapter is the genitive case. Now, this is something that you've seen before, but we want to kind of break it down and understand what it is. And to do that, you want to remember that the ending of a Latin noun tells you what that noun is doing in the sentence. So in other words, if you look at the ending and you know what declension or group your noun belongs to, you can pretty easily tell if it's a subject, a direct object, if it's going with a preposition, or any of the other things that a noun might be doing. You can figure that out by looking at the ending, right? So in this chapter, you're going to learn more about the genitive case. We've seen this before. It's usually showing possession and translated as of in English. So in a couple of the previous stories, you saw phrases like the bedroom of Marcus, the bedroom of Sextus, the mother or father of Cornelia. We've seen this genitive before, but now we really want to understand what it is and look at its endings. So just to give you a quick review of all the different cases you've seen, the nominative case is the subject of the sentence, right? The person or thing that's doing something. The genitive case, which we're seeing in this chapter, is usually showing possession. It's often easiest to translate it with the word of in English. The accusative case is the direct object, right? Something that's receiving the action. So in other words, if I were to say, I throw the ball, you want to say, okay, what's being thrown? The ball. That would be the direct object. It's also been showing up in different prepositional phrases when you're trying to show motion into, towards, or through something. The other case that you've seen is the ablative case, and this is a lot of different uses, but in general, it's usually showing how something happened or maybe showing separation or accompaniment. We're going to dive into this a lot more in later chapters, but you've at least seen enough of the ablative to try to categorize its different uses. The one that we've seen the most often is with prepositional phrases, which is at the bottom of this paragraph. So when you're trying to show position or location or motion out of or away from something. And again, in general, the easiest way to translate the ablative, the most common, is by, with, from, in, on. One of those. The last case you've seen is the vocative case. And this is when you're directly addressing someone. So when you're calling them by name, basically. And it doesn't have to be their name. Whatever it is you're choosing to call them, that would be vocative. So for instance, in English, if you said, hi, mom, right? Mom would be vocative in Latin because you're addressing your mother and using the name mom, right? It's not something we stress a lot because it's pretty easy to spot, right? It'll be in quotation marks. There'll be a comma in front of it. And remember, the vocative and nominative have the same endings. The only time it's different is in second declension singular when the US will become an E. And we've seen that with names like Marcus becoming Marque and Sextus becoming Sexte. So now we can kind of piece this all together into one big chart. And I've thrown dative in here just so you can start memorizing it. Even though we haven't been using dative or looking at it so much, you'll look at it in a later chapter. But if we put everything together, this is our chart of noun endings. And again, the thing you want to remember is every noun belongs to one group. We call them declensions. The way you know what that noun belongs to is by looking at the genitive singular ending. In a dictionary, any Latin dictionary, it's going to give you a couple of pieces of information. The first piece they give you is the nominative singular. The second piece is the genitive singular. And the reason we give you that is because the genitive singular is unique for each group. So in other words, if you know the genitive singular of your noun is an AE, you know it's in the first declension. If it's a long I, it's in the second. And if it's an IS, it's in the third declension. So always pay attention to that second piece of a noun in the dictionary or any vocab list that we use. Make sure you understand that that's telling you what group a noun belongs to. And it's important because there's a lot of overlap in these groups. So if you're not sure which declension the noun belongs to, you can get confused when you see different endings that show up in two different places. Okay, but for now, just lock these in. And in particular, make sure you've got a good handle on what's going on with the genitive case. So now let's take a look at the chapter story. Now, we want to highlight this with the different cases and break it into pieces. So let's start with the first paragraph. Right, in the first sentence, we have omnes Cornelii jam sunt in ride. Omnes Cornelii is our subject, all the Corneliuses, right? And notice on Cornelii, you have the long I. It's talking about the entire family, right? Nominative plural. So now they are, right? Jam sunt, now they are, in Rida. And you'll notice that Rida has the long A on it because it's ablative. They're inside the carriage. They're in the carriage. Romam per viam appium petunt. So here, there's no word highlighted in red, which is totally fine. If you look at our verb, it ends in an NT, petunt. So you know it's they are seeking, right? Or they are looking for. And the last subject we were talking about were the Corneliuses. So we're still talking about the family. So you're saying the Corneliuses, they, right, petunt, are looking for Romam, Rome, right? They're seeking Rome, per viam appium, along the Appian way. And remember, per is one of the prepositions that always takes an accusative noun. In this case, viam appium, right? The Via Appia, that main road cutting along Italy. That's what they're traveling on. Then you have interea in villa davus est solicitus. So meanwhile, interea, in villa, in the house, davus est solicitus. Davus is anxious or worried. Davus est vilicus Cornelii, et si dominus abest, vilicus ipse villam domini curat. So Davus is the overseer, Davus est vilicus. And again, a vilicus is an overseer. In a Roman farm, it would be a slave, right? You have to remember Davus is a slave. He's a slave who watches and kind of is above the other slaves, if that makes sense. He's kind of the leader or the person in charge of the other slaves, right? So he's the vilicus. And you have Cornelii here. Now this is genitive. Right? So if you look at Cornelii here in green and Cornelii in the first line in red, they're spelled the exact same way, which is totally fine. This is where the overlap comes into play, and you have to think about what's going on, right? If it were nominative plural, the sentence wouldn't make sense because you already have a subject with Davus est vilicus, right? Davus is the overseer. So how would the Corneliuses make any sense? There's no plural verbs here. So once you realize that it's not nominative, the other option is genitive singular, which makes a ton of sense because you're saying he's the overseer of Cornelius, right? So this is referring to Cornelius, the dad. Davus is his overseer. It's showing possession. So you're saying Davus is the overseer of Cornelius, and at si dominus abest, we have sort of a side thought here. If the master, the dominus abest, is away, and again, this is just a compound of the verb to be. So you have est, which is he, she, or it is, ab, meaning away from. So you're saying if the master is away. Vilicus ipse, the overseer himself, meaning Davus, the overseer himself, curat, takes care of, vilam, the house. There's your direct object. Now here again, we have domini. And you don't want to get confused because the long I could be a second declension nominative plural noun, except again, it wouldn't make sense. First of all, you'd be saying masters, which doesn't really work. And even if it did, the verb is singular, curat. There's no NT there. So it just doesn't add up for this to be a plural subject. It's genitive singular. So you're saying the overseer himself, vilicus ipse, takes care of the house of the master or of his master, right? It's saying Davus takes care of the house when Cornelius is away. Then you have Davus igitor omnes servos in ariam quae est prope villam venire iubet. So Davus, therefore, Davus igitor, you have to go all the way to the end. You have iubet, he orders, right? Who does he order? Omnes servos, all the slaves. You'll notice that servos has the accusative plural ending, right? So all the slaves, that's who he's ordering. He's ordering them venire, to come into the open space in ariam. Right? So he orders all the slaves to come into the open space. Then we have what's called a relative pronoun, quae. It means which. It's technically nominative here. Don't get thrown off by that. I know we haven't seen these yet. Just trust me when I tell you that it's nominative. You're doing like a side thought. I'm telling you more information about the open space, which is why these two words are next to each other. So you're saying he calls them into the open space, which is prope villam, near the house. And again, prope always takes an accusative. Then you have brevi tempore, aria est plena servorum et ancillarum, qui magnum clamorem faciunt. So in a short time, brevi tempore, the open space, the aria, is plena, it's full. And here we have genitive again, servorum, of slaves, and ancillarum, of slave women. So it's full of slaves and of slave women. And again, here there's no possession involved, but we still want to translate the genitive of, and you'll get to the right answer. It's full of slaves and of slave women who, faciunt, are making a magnum clamorem, a lot of noise, a loud shout, you could say. They're all talking amongst themselves. Tum venit davus ipse, et tacete omnes magna voce clamat. So tu means then. So then Davus himself, davus ipse, comes, venit, right? So Davus himself comes and he shouts, clamat magna voce. Here's the ablative. It's saying how he shouted. He shouted in a loud voice, right? And he shouts, tacete omnes. Tacete is a plural positive imperative. So it's tacere, which means to be quiet. You've dropped the RE, so take would be if you're telling one person to be quiet. The TE here is saying you're telling more than one person to be quiet, which makes sense because you have the vocative omnes, which means everyone. So he shouts in a loud voice, takete omnes, be quiet, everyone. Audite me, there's another plural imperative. Audite means to hear, so he's saying, hear me, or listen to me, you might say, right? He's commanding them to listen to him. Quam dominus ab est, necesse est nobis strenue laborare. So quam means although, dominus ab est, we've seen this before, the master is away. Necesse est, it is necessary, and here we have nobis, which is dative, right? Don't worry about this yet. Just know that nobis means for us, and it's going with necesse est. So it's necessary for us, laborare strenue, to work hard, right? So he's saying even though the master isn't here, we still need to work hard, because remember, Davus is the Velikus, he's the overseer. Tum servi musant, Davus dominus esse volt. Right, so it says, then the slaves, servi, there's our subject, then the slaves mutter, musat. Davus wants to be, esse volt. So volt means he, she, or it wants, right? It's going with Davus. He wants. Esse is the infinitive of the verb to be. So it's saying he wants to be dominus. He wants to be the master. Ecce means look. So ecce, baculum habet. Here, baculum is our direct object. Habet is our verb. And again, it's referring back to Davus. You're saying he is holding a baculum, a stick or a club, right? He's holding a club to threaten them, basically. So the idea here is that if they don't listen, Davus could hit them with this stick or club, however you want to interpret baculum. Nos verberare potest. He is able, potest, verberare, to beat. There's our complementary infinitive. He's able to beat nos, us. And again, if you thought maybe nos was the subject, just remember, if we was the subject, or we were the subject, I guess, the verb would have to have an mus on it, which it doesn't here. It's potest, meaning he, she, or it is able. So that's how you know nos is the direct object and not the subject. So you're saying he's able to beat us. Necesse est igitur facere id quod iubet. So therefore, igitur, it's necessary, necesse est, to do. Facere, there's our infinitive. Remember, necesse est goes with an infinitive. So it's necessary to do id quod, that which he orders, iubet. So id quod, you can just translate as that which for now. You'll learn these words later on. But it's saying it's necessary to do everything that he's ordering, that which iubet, he orders. So they have to, because again, he could beat them, is the idea. Redeunt igitur ad agros servi quod baculum velici timet. So therefore, redeunt, they return. Ad agros, to the fields. Again, they're going towards or to the fields, so it's accusative, agros. And it's servi, the slaves. So you're saying the slaves return to the fields. Because there's our conjunction, and we have a second thought here. Tement, they, meaning the slaves, are afraid or fear. What do they fear? The baculum, the club. Velici here is genitive. And again, if you thought maybe it was the subject, you'd be saying the overseers, which doesn't really make sense because there's only one, Davus. But two, you'd be saying the overseers fear the stick. It just doesn't make sense. Why would an overseer be afraid of a stick? They're the one holding the club, right? So there's a couple different clues here telling you that this has to be genitive. So they're afraid, timet, or they fear the club of the overseer. Right, velici, genitive of the overseer. That's the club that Davus was holding. Then you have said non reddit geta, but geta does not return non reddit. Neque velicum amat, neque iram velici timet. So you're saying he neither, neque means neither nor. So he neither loves amat nor fears timet. And you have some direct objects here. So you're saying he neither loves the velicum, the overseer, nor fears the iram, the anger, velici, of the overseer. And again, velici cannot be nominative because if it were the subject, it would be plural and our verb is singular. So this is how we know it's genitive. It's the anger of the overseer. So it's saying Geta, one of the slaves, isn't afraid of Davus, so he doesn't come back. Illa nocte igitur, quod in agris non iam laborare volt, quibum parat et e vila effuget. So ilanokte, that night, it's ablative. And again, you're going to learn ablative, and it's used often with timing. So we'll figure that out later on. For now, just know it says that night, therefore, because, quote, laborare vult, he wants to work, noniam, no longer. So if we put it together, you're saying he no longer wants to work in agris, in the fields. And again, since agris is ablative, you're not saying into the fields, it's just in the fields, meaning, like inside them, which makes sense because you can't work into a field, really. So it's saying because he doesn't want to work or no longer wants to work in the fields, he parat kibum. And again, we're talking about geta. He prepares food, kibum. There's our direct object. And et, efugit, he flees or he runs away, ewila, out of the house. So he doesn't come back from the fields. Instead, he gets all his stuff ready and he leaves. Nemo eum videt, nemo eum impedit. So nemo here is the subject, nobody. Nobody sees him, eum, there's a direct object, and nobody hinders or stops him, right? Impedit. So nobody sees him, nobody stops him. Nunc per agros, nunc per viam festinat. So now through the fields, per agros, now through the road or along the road, per viam, festinat, he hurries. So you're saying now he's hurrying through the fields, now he's hurrying along the road. It's just describing how he escapes from their country house and farm. Ubi dies est, in ramis arboris se celat, ibi dormit. So when it's day, ubi dies est, right, when it is day, he hides himself, se celat. Celat has to do with hiding, se means himself. So he hides himself in ramis, in the branches. And again, notice it's ablative because he's in or on the branches. And then we have arboris, genitive, of the tree. It's saying the branches belong to the tree. So when it's daytime, he hides himself in the branches of the tree. Ibi dormit, there he sleeps, right? So it's describing how he escaped and the path he takes to run away. He's not going to be out in the daytime because he'd be seen. So instead, he's sleeping during the day and he's running at night. Interia, quamquam nondum lucet, davus omnes servos excitat. So interia means meanwhile. So meanwhile, although quamquam nondum lucet, it's not yet light. Remember, nondum means not yet. Davus omnes servos excitat. So davus excitat wakes up omnes servos, all the slaves. So it's talking about the next day. It's light out almost, but remember the slaves have to start working right at light at sunrise. So Davus is waking him up just before sunrise to make sure that they're out and working. In agros exire et ibi laborare eos ubet. So it's saying he orders, ubet, it's talking about Davus, go all the way to the end because the other verbs we have here are infinitive. So go to our conjugated verb. He orders them, eos. What does he order them to do? Exire in agros, right at the beginning, to go out into the fields, and there, ibi laborare, to work, or to work there, you could say. So he orders them to go out into the fields and to work there. Sed getam non videt, but he doesn't see, non videt, he, meaning Davus, doesn't see Geta, because remember, Geta ran away in the night. Ubi est Geta, where is Geta? Davus igitor est iratus, dende solicitus. So Davus, therefore, is angry, est iratus, then, dende, solicitus, anxious. Why would he be anxious? Well, the anger is justified because one of his slaves ran away. The worrying part, right, being anxious, solicitus, makes sense because you have to remember Davus is a slave, right? And he's in charge of all the other slaves while Cornelius is gone. The implication here is that if Cornelius were to come home and find out that Geta ran away, he's going to blame Davus. That's why he's solicitus, right? He needs to get Geta back. Ad portam vilae stat et viam spectat, sed getam non videt. So he stands, stat, meaning Davus stands, ad portam, at the gate, you could say, or at the door, vilae, of the house. Again, it's genitive. It can't be nominative because you don't have multiple houses here, and our verb is singular, not plural. So it's saying Davus stands, and by the way, how would a house stand? It wouldn't make any sense. So Davus stands at the gate of the house, and he watches spectat, the viam, the road. Said getam non videt, but he doesn't see Geta. So Geta's run away, and Davus is trying to find him. This chapter ties into the culture that you learned. So you want to go back and look at it, the idea of slaves and runaway slaves. What you're looking at here is a dog tag, basically, that slaves would wear. And if you read the Latin, it's saying, catch me, right? Hold on to me, tene me, I've run away, fugi. This is a dog collar, basically, that they would put on slaves to prevent them from running away. When we first found this, archaeologists were looking and linguists were reading this, and they're saying, oh, this must have belonged to a dog. The problem is it wasn't. This was on a human being. So it's saying, if you catch me and bring me back to my master, you can see here domino, right, to my master, you'll get a solidum, you'll get a gold coin. So we know that slaves running away was a problem, right? And you can read a little bit about it in the culture unit that we have in this chapter. But there's definitely some preventative measures that people would put in. So if you have this around the neck of your slave, maybe they put this on a slave who had run away in the past. It's a way of identifying. So if you saw this person wearing this collar, you'd know, oh, they're a runaway slave. So there definitely was the thought of why don't slaves run away? The problem is, if you get caught doing this, you're going to be punished pretty severely. So you want to keep this all in mind as you read this chapter. There is the undertone of how they treat slaves, which is not well. And you want to remember that Geta doing this, it's not just random that he runs away. He'd be making a very conscientious decision to run away. And there's severe consequences if he gets caught. It kind of shows you, or should get you to think, like, why would a slave run away? Why would anyone test doing this, knowing there's such a harsh punishment on the other side? It kind of adds a little more depth to the story when you think of it through that lens. So keep that in mind. Make sure you've read the culture unit, and let it kind of guide you as you go through this story. But again, now that you've seen the story, hopefully it made sense to you. Practice it on your own. Keep working on the case endings. It's a good chapter now that you've seen genitive, to work on your different cases and verb endings. You're getting to the point now where you're able to translate a lot more Latin. So keep working at it and practicing. And if you have any questions at all or anything I can help you with, feel free to put them in the comments.